I'm very grateful to have Lincoln Snyder on our call today. As you saw in the write-up in the description, Lincoln's currently the president and CEO of the National Catholic Education Association. Came into that role in 2021. Tough time coming in with all things COVID. Prior to that, Lincoln served as superintendent and executive director of schools for the Diocese of Sacramento from 2015 to 2021. While out on the West Coast, in addition to that superintendent role, he served as chair of the California Catholic Schools Superintendents Conference. And again, given that we got a number of board directors on the call, just with Lincoln's travels throughout the country, he has served on a number of boards, Catholic school boards. So we're grateful to have Lincoln here. Again, a very talented guy with many responsibilities working for NCEA. So Lincoln, welcome, and I appreciate you also leading us in prayer.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, and happy to start prayer. And I just also just want to offer a note of gratitude for the opportunity to be on this call. So my start was in secondary, working for a religious order that had also taught me in high school, the De La Salle Brothers. And so I'll be talking quite a bit about my secondary and order experiences as I go through this presentation. It's not every day that I get to go back into the very cozy and dynamic world of charisms. So it's great to be here. So why don't we take a moment to place ourselves in the good and loving presence of our God, who desires salvation for all, especially for the students far from his grace, as we offer the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Today's prayer I'm offering is prophets of a future not our own. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that will one day grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So again, very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm going to share the screen here. So yeah, governance is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, and it was my entry back into leadership in the church and in church schools after having had a career as a Catholic school teacher and then gone into private business for a while. I came back into the schools by being invited to be on a school board at the high school I graduated from. And so today I just wanted to offer some thoughts on board governance and really articulate what I think is an important aspect of the ethos and how the board informs that. So the essence of any organization lies in what it believes, what it stands for, and what and how it holds these things to be important. As we organize as boards, especially as nonprofit boards, we're organizing around the values that drive what we do. And for any nonprofit, the product is the change it makes in the life of the person it serves. And I think for us as church, that's even more so. So just wanted to start by talking a little bit about governance and thinking about this conceptually as to where we're at today. So if you think of the traditional parochial school model of governance, it was fairly straightforward, though not linear. So you would have a bishop and or a pastor, if it were a parochial school, that would invite in a religious order and entrust the mission to them. And so the religious order would provide the educational training and support in the formation to mission, and even the staff. So all of the principal, the teachers, everybody who was going to be delivering education and catechesis to the students. And so, of course, pastor had his lane and bishop had his lane, but the order was really the motor behind that training, support, and formation to mission. And of course, in an order school, this was even more so. So bishop, of course, would invite the order in, but really the order did everything. And there was that focus on the student providing back to the community that I really think is essential to the Xaverian charism, like so many. But what the benefit of these models were at the governance level is that you ended up with these networks of grownups that were all committed to supporting each other and supporting the kid and bringing the child to Jesus Christ. So the religious orders were very sophisticated in the way that they organized around governance. Although the org chart was fairly straightforward, they had a lot of things behind that. So every order, of course, has to have a rule, which is their vowed commitment to community and how they treat each other. Many orders have a conduct, which would be their playbook on how they would actually administer their schools and train their teachers. They had community life. They had visitation, so they had associate superintendents or equivalent in the field out visiting the schools and supporting leadership. They have a charism which gives them clear identity and a sense of purpose, which they would all model for the students. And all of that led to a lot of mutual accountability from governance down. So, they truly cultivated that sense of radical accountability to God himself, that when we pass, we'll come before the throne and be asked what we did for the kids in the schools that we served. And they took this very seriously, but it wasn't just a spiritual commitment, it was an organizational one as well. So they had all of this infrastructure to support the administration of their schools. So of course, things started to evolve, and the brothers, I'm sure if you went back 100 years, would every summer gather and decide which brother was going to be the administrator rather of a given school within the district. And then they would go forth the next year and operate. They had to evolve due to changes. And the Xaverian brothers are a really good example of an order that it was 50 years ahead of some others. So I think of the steps that order took, really starting in the 1970s, to invite lay partners in at the level of governance. And so I have this word here, innovation, and for many orders, you have been at this for decades. For others, it's a new thing. For some, these changes came too late. But in all cases, the innovation has some dynamic of inviting in lay partners at that level of the board to offer support. And so you have the orders filling that sponsorship role, but really it's we lay partners that are called to now be the spiritual successors to provide the support and the supervision and ensure that the training and support and formation to mission are provided for at the schools. So what does this demand of us as lay partners? The way I articulate it when I'm setting the standard for so many boards and other groups out and about across the country is that we really need to figure out how to have third order level identity and consistency. So we're never going to have the same level of identity and training that the vowed religious had. I mean, this was truly their entire lives. But we do have to think about how we're going to try to deliver consistently. And we have to think about how we're going to consistently associate formation as if we had a rule. And we also have to think about our conduct. Can we operate our schools consistently at that operational level too? So my first question for you for the day, when you think of your school or any Xaverian school that you've been in, can you tell that it is a Xaverian school specific to the charism of the order? If so, how? And if not, how? So take 60 seconds to reflect on that. And then we'll share out if somebody wanted to offer some thoughts. So any reflections on this point? How can you tell it's a Xaverian school when you enter it?
I've had the opportunity to be at a few of our schools in many ways, and I think and a number of different other schools. And there is a definite ethos when you enter into our schools. I think the focus on the relational component of the charism, and I think you see that in how teachers and students are interacting, how students, teachers, and administrators are interacting. And I think it's one of those things that we talk a lot about it, but it's hard to put your finger on exactly what the difference is. But when you walk the hallways of our schools, I feel that there's something different. No offense, Father Bob, but when I walk the hallway of a Jesuit school, or when I walk the hallway of a public school, or different areas as well, there's definitely an ethos that's present in our hallways in our schools and board meetings. I've been on a few different boards in our network as well.
Well, thanks for that, Ed. No, lucky day. We're going to spend the next part of the talk picking apart exactly that dynamic. So thanks for setting up a nice transition there. Any other thoughts before we? Great. So let me share this. So, Ed, you spoke to this a little bit, and for me, I was formed by the De La Salle brothers, and was on their boards. I was a student at their schools. I'm also Jesuit educated, so I guess I'm Coke and Pepsi in that sense. But one of the most powerful but simple schemas I ever saw in my formation was this one. One of my formators, a man named Greg Copra, put this up on a during a presentation. It said the four spirits of Lasallian formation, and it had these four terms: faith, zeal, community, and practicality. And what I really liked about this was that it captured a little bit of what Ed was talking about, which is that feeling in the hallway of what the spirits are that are driving the school. So the brothers, like the Jesuits and the Xaverians, cultivate particular charisms, and of course particular virtues to support their charism. And of course, they're very committed to the overall mission of the church. But what I liked about these four is, you wouldn't see these, for example, in an Ignatian school. The example I gave to Patrick was, Christian Brothers High School in Sacramento up until the 1960s had a boxing ring in the basement. And though it was gone by the time I was a student there, in spirit, it very much was there. The school very much had preserved a bit of that blue collar practical ethos. And so that stuck. We're going to come back to this as a point of conversation later, so keep this in mind. So anybody know Brother Stephen? I was very, very blessed when I started at NCEA to have Brother Stephen Como serve as the executive assistant. And it was the last year of his life when I started. And Stephen was very kind to me. Obviously he had seen the heights of power with the order as a principal of a big school. He had had a long term at NCEA as the executive assistant, but I went to meet him at his home when I first started, and he was already ill. And after a couple hours of conversation and having a meal, he said, "You're a brother's boy," which was kind of his way of saying that I was in. And that phrase really resonated with me, but because in the world of the De La Salle brothers, before we were Lasallians, we were brothers' boys and brothers' girls. And I think that gets to the heart of what we're talking about with the ethos. So I did my master's thesis on hiring for mission, and just being mindful of time, I'm not going to bore you with all these details. I can provide this, but long story short, a Christian brother who's now a priest wrote a PhD thesis or dissertation on whether or not formation programs are effective, all the programs that the De La Salle brothers run. And the answer is it depends on who you're forming. Long story short, that order has spent lots of years and thousands, if not millions of dollars trying to form leadership within their schools. And Father Tid proved that the values of the culture were more caught than taught. So what was predictive of being formed to the ethos of the order was the sense of ethos of the order that you had going into the program. So people that didn't get the ethos of the order didn't do any better after 3 years of formation than they did before. But the people that had it going in were that much better after completing the program, right? So I think this is not a minor observation because, for many of us, when we're looking to bring new leaders into our schools, either at the level of president or principal or on boards, we look for people that are good people, but even if we perceive them as perhaps not, quote unquote, entirely getting it with the ethos of the order, we think that we can train them to understand it later. And Father Tid proved that that simply isn't possible. So the next thing I had here, just for your review, and I won't spend too much time on it today, but again, the De La Salle brothers have some what they call characteristics of their educational mission. That would be things like being practical or being available to the poor. These are close to or somewhat aligned with the spirits of the order that I talked about earlier. I would just encourage you to look at your own materials and think about this. So Patrick was sharing, I know that you do cultivate some core principles as Xaverian schools. And so keep those in mind when we talk about the spirits of the Xaverian order. But anyway, my point is this, in a mission-based institution that has a distinct charism, like a Xaverian school, when you're looking for leadership, it's better to screen for a sense of that mission at hire and then develop that sense, rather than hire for other characteristics and then hope that you can form a person to mission. So I know that you all know this, when we've seen this happen time and time again, that you hire the person that's a good person, but doesn't receive the formation to mission when you try to apply it. I think an important thing for us in terms of board governance is that it's just as true of board members as it is of school presidents. So my thesis: schools like Xaverian schools need leaders who aren't just interested in the ethos, they need to be of the ethos. They need to be brothers boys and brothers girls. So here's the conversation for the next couple of minutes. 4 words or less. What are the spirits of the Xaverian order? So when you talk about that, and Ed, you touched on this a bit, but I just wanted to have a conversation on this, because this is a really important thing. What's different in the air or when you walk into a school, or what really makes for a brother's boy or brother's girl in the context of the order?
We got some folks on here too that are products of the brothers in the network, so happy to hear your perspective on that.
And again, these don't have to be highfalutin concepts. That practicality bit was really key, I think, to that LaSallian identity. The brothers had, and the De La Salle brothers in Sacramento had a reputation of really forming people who were the backbone of service in Sacramento: cops, firefighters, nurses, doctors. They have a much more upwardly mobile, upper middle class student body now, but that wasn't the spirit of the school for a long time, especially if you look back to any time before the 21st century.
Paul, you're muted.
When I was at Malden Catholic, it was just a boys' school. I know, obviously, it's co-divisional, but there was definitely a sense that at least one of the brothers knew each of the boys, and sort of kept an eye on them, and that they got us, if you know what I mean by that expression. Just the way they talked to us, they kept an eye on us. Each one, I think if you asked almost all of my classmates, they would mention 1 or 2. I could mention 2 brothers that have had a lifelong influence on me. Actually 3, if I think Brother Kevin Kenny. But I think if I went to my classmates, each one of them would have one brother that they really felt took them under their wing, and even if it was in a headlock, and really made sure that they were doing the best that they could. They were being looked after, and they got a sense that they were a Lancer.
Yeah, this is Bill Zucker. I'll say service was one. If you look at the mission these days, it's serving, it's humility, and a continuous passion for learning. And I think it comes right out of the mission statement today. And it was core when I was back at Xaverian High School. We had in work service in the community my senior year, and made sure that you went out there and showed loving and caring for the community.
Fantastic.
I think it's just to echo what Paul said, it's care for the individual. I mean, I went to Xaverian, I worked at Xaverian, I had a school at St. John's Prep, and my daughter's now at MC at Malden Catholic, and it's pretty amazing to see from 1984 to 1988 what I experienced, student experience, comparable to what my daughter's experiencing at Malden Catholic right now and what our students are. And there's a lot of kind of, it's comparable to the Jesuit world of cura personalis, but it's very much care for the individual, and you are known, valued, and loved. And I think that's something that's very important in the midst of our schools.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Paul said earlier about at least one brother sort of being your mentor, or guardian angel might be a better description in my case. But I went to good counsel in the mid '60s, and we were all boys, just like Paul's school was back then. And there was lots and lots of brothers, and they really the discipline. I can relate to what Paul said about a headlock and other kinds of disciplinary matters, but that was the way of the times back then, and that was very effective, and that's what our parents wanted. And now I fast forward. Now I've been on the board of Good Counsel for 8 years, and I don't know how it happened, but I became the chair. So I think it was the money that was involved. They told me I was going to get 4 times my predecessor, so I jumped at the deal. And anyways, today I'm amazed at our school, which is now sorry about that, guys, which has now been co-ed for 35 years. And it's just amazing the service and humility of the school and the community of the school for a large school, at least. I think in the Zavarian system, we're about 1,250 students. I don't know the size of all the schools, but anyways, it's just amazing to me how our school today just cares for the community and all the projects that they do. It's really heartwarming as a board member to see that.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think that these are all core to the essence of what we do as boards. So we do have a fiduciary duty, of course, as trustees or as directors on a board, on a nonprofit board. And you're all very familiar with the standard ones of obedience, of care, and of loyalty. So we owe that to the member. But I think that the important thing about, and I'm tabbing through this, just being mindful of time, is that, from the perspective of the orders that are the moral owners of these schools, I think that when they think of our fiduciary obligation to them and to the mission, one of the things they're asking of us is preservation of that ethos. So the charism flowed through the order to the students in a really clear way, and it was very carefully cultivated. And it took a lot of work to create that and to preserve that. But it's very easy to drift from being vigilant on that point. We have, of course, an obligation to offering an excellent education. We have our broader Catholic mission. We have fewer brothers or fewer people that were connected to the order at a time when the numbers were greater. But the important thing to remember in all of this is that sense of mission is caught and not taught. And, so I think when we're looking at cultivating boards and board members and looking at that next generation of board leadership, this is going to be more important now than ever, is that we have to distinguish as leaders between people who appreciate the ethos and people who are of the ethos. And so I think one of the non-negotiables for board and board recruitment is that the fiduciary duty has to be to the charism itself. And the charism flowing through the board is non-negotiable. I mean, I think one of the great quotes, and I think it was Peter Drucker who said, is the culture eats policy for breakfast. And, one of the things I've noticed with Catholic school boards, especially ones connected to orders where the orders aren't there anymore, is that culture can shift really quickly. So, vigilance around making sure that we have people of the ethos on the board in the first place is the single most important thing we can do to preserve it. So just some questions for conversation. I told Patrick I'd present for 20 some odd minutes, but really want to open it more to conversation. And these are conversation starters for your own boards as you think about formation at your meetings. So some of the questions to ponder for us today. So like, what does it look like when we're extending these principles of quote unquote hiring for mission to the boards themselves? How do we find those new trustees who are of the ethos? And what do we do on that practical level if we can't find trustees who have the charism flowing through them? I've known some very good trustees that were very successful business people, that were alum, that were parents, that had students who had been very successful, really wanted to give back to the school, but weren't necessarily of the ethos or of the charism, and that provoked a bit of drift when they did come into board leadership. And then finally, beyond the formation programs and the training that might already exist within the Xaverian ecosystem, like what are some of the challenges for trustees to own that mission and be of the ethos? What's preventing us from building more of that pool? So those are my thoughts on governance and the importance of ethos for a board. At this point, I'd just like to open it to discussion around any of these questions, or ask me anything on this topic or otherwise.
Lincoln, Rachel, go ahead. I saw you unmute there.
Oh, I just wanted to know, can any of you give me a nice illustration or example of what you might do at a board level that is shows how the ethos is caught and not taught? Because I'm at St. Xavier in Louisville, and it's an all boys school. Obviously, I didn't go there. I went to St. Mary's up at Notre Dame for college. And so, my husband and I are very, as our boys are devout Catholics. But tell me about how we can, to the next generation, because we currently have no brothers teaching at St. Xavier anymore. And I'd love to hear what the board can do in a concrete way to catch it rather than teach it.
I can jump in on that one a little bit, Rachel, with things that I've seen work. So it does take an investment, but of tracking people, but at every school within a system, you're going to have those individuals that are the animators and not the ones who draw cartoons, but the ones that really have caught whatever that spirit is, and they love sharing it with other people. So I think it's really important for governance and for management to track who they are. One of the things one of the mistakes I've seen some other orders make is you have those people that are on fire for mission, but somehow you never quite find the right role or job or promotion or next thing for them. And at some point they drift, right? And if you let them get away, it's really hard to get them back. So I think on one practical level, understanding who your people on fire for mission are and then looking for opportunities for them to share that is really important. They're going to be your bench for boards and for leadership and for all other sorts of things in the future. So like I said, being really mindful, naming those people, recognizing them for it, and then helping them find opportunities to share it is a really obvious but important step. And it's one that's really easy to overlook because, often it's not any one person's responsibility to support those people who really animate the charism on a given campus. But in terms of the future, I think it's one of the most important things that we can do.
I can comment on that too, but I'm also going to finish it with a question for you, Lincoln. I think a lot of this really, it stems from how important it is to have the top leader at the school be of the ethos and not just appreciating the ethos. We are just wrapping up a head of school search with one of our schools in the network, and a great deal of emphasis was extended to the candidates to really assess mission fit. Do they understand this? Will they be that mission leader, that spiritual leader, that pastoral leader? So that we're making sure that we're not, we will still bring formation, but that's to a point you had made earlier, Lincoln, that it's, they already get it coming in, and the formation's just going to help them be that much stronger, but we don't want to be, training them from nothing. I think you can extend that to board directors, but this is where it's going to my question too. I think there's a tendency at the board level where if they're alums of the school, a lot of times I think we just give folks a pass that, oh, of course they're of the Ethos, they graduated from here. I think that's an area still to explore. But getting to my question point, I think there could be a tension sometimes. And Lincoln, if you've seen some best practice here, where neither do we want our boards to be all alumni. We want to diversify, and there could be value in having community leaders, parents, friends of the school, shy of, I'm sure many folks on this call have done hiring, so you are accustomed to questioning for cultural fit. But, does it go to that level of our boards need to step up with that mission assessment more than just, hey, this is their strong resume as it relates to finances or investment or advancement or marketing? My guess is we may go easy on candidates on the mission fit. And maybe have you seen practices that boards do to really discern that a bit better, to Rachel's point?
I have, so I think that it's easy not to be vigilant on these points in school. So the school I was board chair at, my successor was a school parent who was a very successful developer, who was an atheist and would have been very happy to run the school as a charter school. And, nothing against him. He's a great guy, cared a lot about the school, but his sense of mission of the school was just a little bit different than what I think a person who, was a brother's boy or brother's girl would have been, right? So I think that sometimes it's easy to look like, well, really close, but that one always gave me pause. Like, well, maybe there's a fundamental gap in understanding a mission here, and that could lead to misunderstandings in terms of the direction of the school. I think that the board leadership has to absolutely be on fire for the ethos, even if some individual trustees might be brought on for other skills, right? So, and I definitely think that the non-negotiable for those other trustees would be openness to formation to mission. They have to at least want to learn more and show a real heart or real love for the underlying Xaverian mission and in its true sense. And as far as school leadership itself goes, we're all under pressure now to find school leadership. It's getting tougher than ever to recruit that next generation of presidents and principals. And it's interesting knowing what we know. I still so many times see boards or orders or bishops kind of squint and say, well, maybe not quite our guy for the mission, but we're going to send him to a training program over the summer and it'll work out. And so I think that being vigilant on that point is really important too. If the person needs, if you think, well, they've got everything except they're going to need a couple, 3 years of formation to really understand the charism, they're probably not your person. And being humble about that is tough because we're under pressure to find those leaders and they don't always present themselves in the first or second or even third round.
There's little pieces within our network. There is a nomination forms that our boards use that really are guided by the head of school and the board chair. One of the questions is really speaking to mission fit. And on a few occasions, those have been sent back to the administrator just for any lack of seriousness in an answer. I've seen, a few words of, Rick would really understand the mission, period. Like that, you're just repeating and regurgitating the question. You're not telling us anything. So, that's that's on our responsibility too, from the sponsorship level and up to the corporate members. But I think to Lincoln's point, just being intentional and aware that everybody has that responsibility to own that ethos. It will be an ongoing necessity for all religious order schools and boards like ours.
Yeah, our Catholic schools operate without much middle management, and we always run really lean and mean. And the challenge of that is you might have those people that go through formation programs or show appetite for mission, and they might need time. They might need that next job that'll position them for being a president or principal after that. And that position maybe doesn't exist or isn't going to be open for years, and they drift. And so it also seems to me that sometimes you might just have to invest a little bit more in that next step for some of your employees on the rise who are between here and there. It costs a little bit of money, but if you don't, they're not there when you actually need them to make that next step up to president or principal. So that's my thought as well, is maybe a little bit of middle management sometimes isn't the worst thing, because we do need to have people in those seats growing and getting prepared for the next stage.
Other questions for Lincoln or thoughts on this presentation?
Patrick, I wanted to follow up on something you said earlier about just making sure, and Lincoln, of course, has said the same thing, just making sure that the people understand the mission and everything else. I think one of the mistakes that I certainly can see in our past is looking, assuming that candidates who have contributed a lot of money to the school are going to be right on board with what the charism and the ethos and everything else are of the school. And quite honestly, to me, that those have become some of the troublemaker situations that I think we have to be very careful of. Is just because the alum might have put in a lot of money doesn't mean that they're on board and or should be on the board, so to speak. And I think that's just something to be very careful of. I'm sure every school probably has some example of that in their past, and you know, I think it it also is some of these alums who generally would be older think the school should be run like it was when they were there, and that's just not the case. Everything's changed, demographics, the ethnicity, the religious affiliation of the students. It's just a different ball game than when a lot of some of the older alums, were involved. So I think you just have to be very careful with them as a group, particularly the ones who are big donors, and make sure that they're on board with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, 100% agree, Bill. And I think, again, that's why there's such importance and gravity around making sure that we have the right heads of schools and we have the right, board leaders, because it's going to flow from there. I have a slide deck that I take some folks through that I worked in a school back when I was a teacher that had a change in board chair and a change in president of the school, and philosophy, ethos, mission was non-existent. And it took them about 8 years to completely destroy a beautiful mission of a school, just, transforming it into something completely opposite of what it was. And again, a lot of that's going to flow from leadership at the top. So that's why we take very seriously the board chair appointments, as well as head of school appointments. But that again needs to trickle down from those leaders in particular. Because if they don't own it, it's rarely going to flow its way back up to the top. Because of those, Bill, as you said, some of those influential folks who the buck speaks louder, the dollar speaks louder. Rachel, you unmuted? Comment?
Right. I just wanted to piggyback on what Bill said, and I'm grateful for you saying it. I think that there is a great deal of tension sometimes, and sometimes that can be a good tension in ushering into play a new dynamic and new demographic of our schools, and then also maintaining the traditional values and the charisms. And I wonder if any of you have great ideas on how to convey to the older alumni, or maybe the more traditional alumni, that that the brotherhood or the charisms are still being honored, and but then we are changing and maybe we look a little differently. And so have you guys found ways where that was particularly successful, where your messaging was successful in that way?
I just say at Malden Catholic, we've had to make some very important decisions in the past few months. And we kept making sure that, that you can get lost in the financial part of it, or the construction part of it, or the interest rates part of it, which is all important, and that goes to our fiduciary duties. But we're fortunate because we have two brothers who participate in our board meeting, and at the meeting we had when we had to make these decisions, brother Larry in particular kept bringing us to how it was not just the business side, but it was consistent with our mission, the decisions that we were undertaking. And I think to do that, to show the people that, yes, you have to make the dollars and cents, right? You have to make the budget balance, but you can have the budget balance in a way that is consistent with your mission. And I think that's one way to do it.
Yeah, as a school board, it's really easy to think that you're somehow representing the school vis-a-vis the order, and not that you're actually representing the order vis-a-vis the school. And so, remembering that you are the brothers when you're seated at the table is I think, the great leap of the imagination that's at the heart of this.
Hey, Lincoln, I had a question for you as a follow-up to your comment about we don't run with a lot of middle management. So I'm on the board at Xavier High School with Patrick. We recently went through a search, which kind of didn't end in a search, I guess. It was kind of unique because we ended up going with the interim. But, we had a couple of candidates internally that wanted to interview and be considered to be the new president. And quite frankly, I think everybody decided they weren't ready for that. But as I sit and think about what you said, I'm not sure there's anything in terms of a process or anything kind of thoughtful as to how they would ever get that experience to ever be seriously considered as a candidate.
It can be, and for a lot of teachers that become administrators, sometimes it's tough to be a prophet in your own kingdom, and to grow, you're going to have to lateral, say, to another school. What I meant when I made that comment was, if you think about your schools collectively, you might have that bench of people that 3 to 5 to 10 years out could be a really good frontline administrator. But somehow it's really hard to find that opportunity anytime soon, or the opportunity that's the right fit at the school where they're at. I went through a formation program with the De La Salle brothers, and probably only about a third of the people went through the program ended up presidents or principals, and more had the skills, but they couldn't find that next step job to keep them on track, and so they exited or stalled. And especially if you have the opportunity for presidents to come together or board chairs to come together, maybe that's a good topic for conversation. Like, how do we actually cultivate the bench for 5 to 10 years out collectively? Because the person that is going to be, the person that's going to grow into the role of president or principal might find themselves needing a lateral to another school. It might be good to keep them in the network, especially if they're on fire for the charism.
Thank you.
Any other final questions or wrap-up thoughts? Very good. Well, Lincoln, again, I want to thank you very much for your time, and we'll continue our efforts with our boards and our schools, because again, it's the brothers, like you had mentioned at the beginning, one of the very first religious orders to empower lay leaders as board directors. And so we might be ahead of the curve compared to a lot of religious orders, but the importance of our own board formation and making sure board directors are of the ethos will forever be a key criteria to successful Xaverian Catholic schools into the future. So wise words for you to share with us and for us to continue to promote well past this session. So
hey, thank you so much. It's a beautiful charism. You've really done a lot for the church and for the network, and I know that Brother Stephen is one of those saints that's intercessing for NCEA as we're out and about trying to do our best for mission. So thank you all very much. It's great to be here, and I'm going to send my slide deck to you, Patrick, so if you wanted to distribute, you'll be able to send it on to the group.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all. Everybody have a great night. Bye-bye.